Welcome back, Guardians, to another episode of Destiny Lore and Theories. In this episode, we'll talk about the potential Eris may have for going mad and taking over the leadership position over the Hive. But first, let's discuss a little background. In a previous episode titled A Not-So-Brief History of Oryx, we talked about not only the history behind Oryx himself, but also that of his sisters and the entire Hive species. To quickly recap, the Hive have a religion and a culture based off of sword logic. Sword logic states that power must be given, not bestowed upon, by beings of increasing might. The power of thrall are consumed by acolytes, who in turn are consumed by knights and wizards, who are consumed by ogres, and so on and so forth. This is done because each hive has a worm that must be fed, or the hive becomes consumed by the creature. Eventually, a ladder of power leads to whosoever happens to be ruling the hive. Until the events of the King's Fall raid, that leader was Oryx and his sisters Xivu Arath and Savathun. Now, however, who is currently ruling the hive? Ideally, it would be the fire team of Guardians that destroyed Oryx. The Guardians are severely chastened by the infamous Toland the Shattered when he states that the hive must have a ruler. You fools! You disastrous, bumbling squanderers, it's not right. Who now shall be First Navigator, Lord of Shapes, Herald God, Taken King? Not you. You might have been kings and queens of the deep, but you have toppled Oryx and you have not replaced him. But how ideal is it, really, for Guardians to rule a race of beings who desire nothing short of complete consumption of the light and the destruction of the Traveler? Guardians are not rulers, they are followers. They follow the Traveler by way of the Speaker, as well as the vanguards of the tower. But more importantly, they follow Eris Morn, the Bane of Crota, herself. Eris was a hunter, a Guardian, before her and her fire team's ill-fated attack on Crota. Although originally alongside the doomed Guardians Sai Mota, Vel Tarlo, Ariana III, Omar Aga, and yes, Toland the Shattered, Eris was the only one to eventually re-emerge from the Hellmouth. Since then, she has sent the Guardians on a number of missions to eradicate Hive sects in the Cosmodrome, on the Moon, and even Oryx's Dreadnought. If this sounds a little like Oryx receiving tribute from his Hive underlings, there could be a very good reason why. It's been theorized in the past that Eris has her very own Hive worm, either physically inside of her or inside the tomb husk she carries on her person at virtually all times. This would have formed while she was trapped in the Hellmouth, possibly when she stole 3 Hive eyes after losing her own sight. Regardless of how exactly she would have received the worm, it would require her to sate it by either killing her foes directly or sending Guardians to kill for her. If this is indeed the case, Eris is gaining a substantial amount of power and has been for some time. If sword logic dictates that the Hive must have a ruler, and Oryx's sisters are not currently available, their exact whereabouts being unknown, the most obvious candidate seems to be Eris herself. Another possibility could be Toland, who was likely trapped within the Ascendant realm of the Hive. Eris believes him dead, however we've been unlocking Grimoire cards that seem to state otherwise. It has not really been speculated as to whether he would be in possession of his own worm or not. The advantage Eris will have is that all of the Guardians are currently tithing tribute to her and not to Toland. If Toland were to have a worm, but he refused or otherwise could not kill, eventually the worm would consume and destroy him. If Eris were to take over ruling the Hive, what would happen, and how would it affect the Guardians? Life in the tower would be different, as Eris would not be able to remain a vendor and her items would have to be given out by another tower patron. She would likely go fully mad as she became more and more Hive in nature, seeking to gain her own descendant realm, just as the original Hive gods did. She may possibly be powerful enough to unleash genocide against the Hive, however in the end either she would turn on the Guardians and the citizens of the tower, including her friend Ikora Rey, or she would ultimately be destroyed by the worm. My theory is this: Eris will eventually become stronger and more Hive-like as the Guardians continue to kill in her name. She will eventually be evicted from the tower as Ikora's support and trust of her will be outweighed by growing mistrust from Zavala, Cade Six, and the Speaker. Without the support of the last city and the Guardians, Eris will grow powerful enough to become ruler over the Hive. As Eris despises the Hive for murdering her fire team and ultimately blinding her, she will seek to destroy that which she rules over. There is a possibility that she will be able to completely decimate the Hive, the most direct manifestation of the darkness that we've yet seen. Doing so will ultimately kill her in the end, as either she'd be unable to further satisfy her worm, or the Guardians would be forced to repeat the action taken against Oryx and kill her in her own throne world. What do you think? Will Eris be able to further resist the temptation of the hive worm within her? Does she even have a hive worm to begin with? Share your prediction in the comments section below, and stay tuned for next week's episode of Destiny Lore and Theories.